Our top story, aircraft carrying aid to tsunami-hit Tonga have departed from Australia and New Zealand after the island's airport reopened. The relief supplies, including water containers and generators, will arrive on Thursday. Telephone services between Tonga and the outside world began to be restored late on Wednesday. A huge volcanic eruption and tsunami on Saturday had cut off the island, and it's likely to take a month or more for full internet connectivity to return. A local journalist told Reuters that Tongans were cleaning up after the disaster, but feared that they may run out of drinking water. The United Nations says over 80% of the island's population has been badly affected. And for more, let's go live to our correspondent Owen Poland, who's in Auckland in New Zealand. Owen, so we've been getting just piecemeal information from Tonga, but now that phone lines are restored, we should be getting a better picture. So what can you tell us?
After a 5-day communications blackout, limited telephone contact has now been established with Tonga after an emergency 2G satellite service was set up. However, it's very unstable and provides only about 10% of the usual service in Tonga. Nevertheless, residents have started sending out photographs of the damage and the huge cleanup operation that's now underway to clear away debris from roads and buildings, and also remove the massive amount of volcanic ash that's covered everything on the islands, including electricity transformers, which keep on failing and causing power outages. So far, there are now still just 3 deaths reported. However, there are reports coming in that people have suffered significant number of injuries. The biggest need right now, as you mentioned, is for drinking water because the toxic ash has contaminated Tonga's water supplies. And of course, clearing ash from the runway at Tonga's main airport has been a major priority so that planes can start bringing in aid. At one stage earlier this week, around 200 workers were photographed on the runway physically sweeping away the ash. And the good news, Young, is that the airport is now finally open.
Yeah, and that's a huge development because aid and assistance will be able to get in. So what can you tell us on that?
Well, within the last hour, a New Zealand C-130 Hercules aircraft has landed in Tonga with that much needed drinking water and other essential supplies. And in about an hour's time, the first of 2 New Zealand Navy vessels will arrive with equipment, including satellite phones, that will help open up communication lines with the outer islands, which have been hard hit by this disaster. Another ship is also on its way from Australia, and of course, China is standing by to fly in disaster relief equipment. New Zealand's Defence Minister says it's going to take an international effort for Tonga to recover and rebuild. And he says it was important for New Zealand to get there first to set an example as a responsible partner in the Pacific. However, COVID-19 protocols in Tonga will be a challenge for the aid workers. Like New Zealand, Tonga's international borders have been closed since the pandemic began, and so far Tonga has recorded only 1 single case of COVID-19. Anyone who enters the country must go into a 3-week quarantine period, which is obviously impractical for the people who are now delivering those essential supplies. So the Tongan government says that the last thing it needs is a tsunami of COVID-19 entering the country because of the international aid effort. So New Zealand has agreed to a contactless disaster relief arrangement where supplies will be pretty much left on the ground for locals to collect. But at least the aid is now getting through, Young.
Thanks so much, Owen, for that update. Owen Poland in Auckland for us. CMG reporter Wang Tong has spoken to Louise Waterhouse, the Consul General of Tonga in Sydney, who's detailed the scale of disaster.
Would you please tell us what's the latest update that you got from the Tonga government at the moment about the situation in Tonga?
Yes, so Kong, obviously we've been through a terrible incident and maybe perhaps the worst that's been recorded in modern history with this volcanic eruption that happened in Tonga Island, just about 65 kilometres north of the capital. The actual plumes of the volcano went up to 20 kilometres into the air. And we had tsunami waves ranging from around 1 meter on the main island up to 15 meters in some of the low-lying islands close to the volcano. And it's been actually quite horrific in terms of the widespread damage and the trauma that it has caused to the kingdom. One thing, where the waves obviously were not so high, the tsunami, the damage from the waves was limited to maybe 50 meters from the shore, which of course picks up a lot of the resorts and people living by the seaside. But then the damage has been far worse in terms of the ash. The ash has been very bad for quality of the air, the quality of drinking water, and also the pollution to Tonga. If you look at before and after photos of areas of Tonga, from one moment to the next, they've gone from bright, luscious green to a dead grey, almost like a moonscape. And this blanket of ash is actually centimeters thick. And at the moment, it's even rendering the airport is unusable because the airport, the tarmac, is totally covered in this thick blanket of ash. And Tonga doesn't have the facilities that perhaps we have in other parts of the Western world. And so all cleanup has to be done by hand. So even squads of 20 and more are finding the job overwhelming.
The eruption of Tonga's underwater volcano on Saturday was felt as far away as Fiji, 750 kilometers away. Li Peng, a Chinese national living in Fiji's capital Suva, told CGTN about his experience and also an initiative by the Chinese community there to help the people in Tonga.
Sir, can you tell us where you are now?
I'm in Suva, the capital of Fiji.
When the Tongan undersea volcano erupted, did you feel anything in Suva? What was the situation?
The quake was felt in Suva, Fiji. The most obvious thing was that the doors of the building shook for more than 10 minutes, as far as we could see. At the same time, there was a rumbling sound.
Posts online from Fiji are saying that after the eruption, people in Fiji can smell sulfur in the air and that there's acid rain. Is this true?
I personally don't feel pungent gases, nor do I feel acid rain. Perhaps these changes need to be measured by laboratory instruments. In fact, we do have that concern. The Chinese embassy in Fiji has issued a warning against possible acid rain, pungent gases and other injuries, but we haven't experienced that.
Is there anything else you would like to add about what you know of Tonga?
Right now, we are worried about the lives of the people in Tonga. Recently, the Chinese embassy in Fiji also held an emergency meeting with our companies to encourage Chinese companies in Fiji to donate money and materials to express our support to Tongan friends.
New Zealand's foreign ministry says a key undersea cable that was destroyed in the volcanic eruption may take at least 4 weeks to be repaired. Well, we talked with Bruce Howe in Honolulu about this. He's a research professor at the Ocean and Resources Engineering University of Hawaii at Manoa.
My understanding is the Tonga cable is broken about 37 kilometers to the west of the main island of Tonga in the direction of Fiji. This means that the only communication is via satellite with very, very little capacity and is very slow. This frustrates the relief effort, even the coordination for repairing the cable itself, and many of the aspects of life we take for granted now, access to internet and finances and business. It's a major, major impact on the entire economy. While the cable industry has 170 years of experience repairing cables, it simply takes time to mobilize a ship, transit to the location, effect the repair, complete the operation. This is difficult in this part of the world because there are relatively few ships, and it's about 4,000 kilometers from Tonga to Papua New Guinea, where the closest cable repair ship is right now. The cable is about the size of a garden hose, like this. And so it's quite delicate in some ways, in other ways strong, obviously. The ship goes out and drags for it with a special hook that cuts the cable and brings up that one end. And then they have to go and drag for the the other end also. It can take 1 to several days to do this. More volcanic activity clearly is possible, and there's just a lack of data. And so I would imagine that as a ship is transiting to do the repair, there will be sensors put in place to monitor seismically, typically, activity on the main island, at least, to provide data to inform the ship if there's any risk of a eruption during the repair process.
And there's also the environmental impact of the volcanic eruption. So let's find out about the effects on the climate and air. Wang Tianyi joins us from the China Meteorological Administration with the details. So Tianyi, how will things look for the Pacific region?
Hello, Jiaoyang. Well, the massive underwater volcanic eruption in Tonga Saturday not only triggered a tremendous ash, stunning shockwave, but also the Pacific-wide tsunami threat. And estimated as the biggest eruption in nearly 30 years, the Tonga government even called this event as an unprecedented disaster. Well, as the residents are struggling in the aftermath, people around the world is wondering one question: will the temperature around the globe get cooled in the wake of this eruption? Well, actually, huge eruption could cause temporary global cooling. Well, here comes the scientific explanation. Well, the explosion of the volcanoes could pump tons of sulfur dioxide gas into the upper atmosphere. Well, there the gas combined with water and to create aerosol particles reflected and scattered some of the sun's rays, keeping them from hitting into the surface. We also have the temporary global cooling examples. Well, the most recent huge eruption in 1991 in the Philippines had the effect of cooling atmosphere temperatures by about half a degree for 2 to 3 years. And back to the catastrophic eruption in 1815 in Indonesia, it even caused the well below normal temperatures during summer season globally for several years. Well, this time the Tonga eruption was matching the second top power at its peak. However, it only lasted about 10 minutes, so the amounts of gas it pushed into the air is pretty small. So unless the Tonga eruption resumes and continues at a similarly strong level, which is considered unlikely, it won't have some global cooling effect. So the global warming is still taking the dominating trend in the long-term range, but it will be taking at a slower pace. And currently the forecast shows that we're still in the middle of the rainy season for many locations in the oceanic area. So rain will be the most concern for the local residents in terms of weather. So please stay on high alert and stay safe, and hope the situation will get better as soon as possible.